So, hi again. My name's Derek. This is so weird, like introductions are weird, but I'm a clinical intern here at I Am Clinic.
And a damn good one.
I'll take it. But yes, so I started here like not September, like October. It's been a few months. It's been great. Currently grad student at DU doing international disaster psychology. What else is there to say? I mean,
What brings you to I Am Clinic?
well, it sounds like, well, it is now that I know, so I can't say
Sure.
it sounds because I work here now, or intern. So it's like a great clinic, especially for us queer folk. I think it's a very safe space. I think we need more spaces like these. And yeah, so it was like one of the few options that caught my eye, and I'm like, and I know I've said we, so if it's not clear enough, so like as a gay man not from Denver, I thought it was a very interesting experience to have, and it's hasn't backfired yet, and it won't,
Yes.
and it won't either. So because it's a really good space, I know when I continue next year as well in August. So yeah, I think
And
that's
here we are.
yeah.
Yes.
I think there's a lot more to say, but in 2 minutes, that it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like many of us, and this might sound silly to say, but maybe from like a clinical perspective or a research perspective, are really interested in the topic of sex, which kind of parlays in many ways or is directly connected to what we want to talk about today. And I'm really excited because I think there's a lot that we can cover here. So, kind of describe for us how you kind of consider the larger umbrella of polyamory, open relationships. How would you term it?
Okay. Yeah. I love how you said that it was me this time bringing in the sex conversation. I was like a bit hesitant about. I'm like, should that be part? But yeah. But going back to your question, I think depending on how we approach it, I think socially a lot of the terms are interchangeable. But yes, if we were to use or go to the umbrella term, and I think it's from like top down, I think it's the phrase. But if we were to go to like the broader aspect of it, that's where we would get the term like consensual non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy, and then I think everything else that we might talk about today, like open relationships, polyamory, swinging, monogamish, and monogamy as well, so we don't forget about it, not monogamy, sorry. Everything else would fall in the umbrella. Monogamy, it's its own term. But yeah, I think if we were to look at it from like a clinical perspective, or a bit less influenced by social factors, then that's like the written in stone part of it.
Yeah. How would you kind of distinguish like polyamory from swinging, from ethical non-monogamy? What do you feel like are the things, if I'm in a relationship really kind of considering what might be the right fit for me, how would you describe each one?
That is a difficult kind of question to answer, like, because once again, depending on each community that you participate in, each will have a different definition for it. But if we were to go into it, I think, let me see, I have it right here. I was not going to, I remember, I was like, let me write it down because I won't remember. But let's start with polyamory, because polyamory is also within the broader umbrella of ethical non-monogamy. Polyamory also has a few ramifications to it, or like different relationship dynamics. So polyamory is a relationship dynamic where you can involve multiple people at once, but it would, or at different times, just there's different people involved in that relationship, and there are different dynamics to polyamory. I was going to say ramifications again, don't want to keep saying the same word. But it kind of depends on where that primary couple is going to be. So it's kind of like a hierarchy. If there's no hierarchy, like everyone's playing the same like playing field, for lack of a better word. There's polyfidelity, which is where It's kind of like a polycule where everyone's kind of loyal to the, let's say it's a 5-person group, then everyone's kind of loyal to that 5 group, and we can date and have sexual intimacy amongst us 5, but it won't leave this group. And then we could also have solo polyamory, and that concept's a bit difficult to grasp, but it's when a person kind of views themselves as the primary, so they can go and integrate themselves into different relationships that are already going on, but they don't have a primary relationship as we view traditional like 2-people relationships.
Sure.
Then we would have open relationships, which is what is most commonly known as just getting a hall pass, I like to call it, into having sexual intimacy with other people. So to use like the better known word, just having sex with other people.
Sure.
Then we had swinging. Swinging and monogamish are pretty similar. I think the difference between swinging and monogamish is, and I'm sorry if I butcher this. Swinging is mostly when a couple, a traditionally quote unquote monogamous relationship, opens up their relationship to explore having sex with others. Traditionally, it happens between that couple and like a third or a fourth, but there is no romantic aspect to it.
Right.
It's more like directly into sex, and that's it. And then monogamish might include, very similar to having sex outside of the primary couple, but it might include some romantic aspects to it.
Yeah. And the way that I kind of hear it is almost kind of like, and I know this isn't completely correct, but like swingers might be the term we would use for monogamish in like the 1970s with the pineapple outside, you know? And now monogamish is kind of this idea of like fidelity, a primary couple involving 2 people who often sexually play with other people from time to time. Yeah.
And funny that you bring up the pineapple, because it's still a symbol use primarily for swinger couples. I have a friend, shout out to my friend, no names mentioned, but she works with, never remember the name, but she works like boarding people into cruises, so it's like, I don't want to call it a port agent because that's not the name. But yeah, she was currently working with a cruise that was primarily catering to swinger couples. So yeah, I thought it was very cool because they would get name tags, and the name tags, they would say like if they were single, if they were in a couple, if they were open to XYZ, what they were open to. So I think it's becoming, even though it's like a niche within the dating realm, it's becoming more socially accepted, and I think sexual acceptance of is great.
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating to have to work with couples just in general, the way that we assemble our attachments, our communication styles, repeating arguments, so forth and so on. And I think to have, I've worked with more polycules or thruples or whatever we want to call them throughout the years. But it is really interesting to see like polyamory have that primary attachment and then other attachments kind of forming around that, given the contract of the primary couple. And of course, primary couple, who is that? It's basically you and your partner. Do you know what I mean? Like, or me and my partner, whoever is the primary couple gets to decide. And I'm saying that because this can almost become like a web. And so that original contract should be set between you and your partner.
Yeah, so like I like that you mentioned the aspect of a contract, because I like my things like ironed out, and I like to have everything set out in the open. I feel like communication is key, and comprehension as well. So how do you go about like setting these contracts? I mean, since you've worked with a lot of couples that participate in polycules or thruples, how have you seen the concept of like, we can call it like the ethical non-monogamy contract come up? Like, how does that conversation start, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's always evolving, and I think that's a good thing, and here's why. Oftentimes couples will say, let's open up our relationship, and then they have to decide, are we going to be open to sexually playing with other people and leaving it at just sex, or do we actually want to open up our relationship to date people, form romance, and actually fall in love with other people? And that's kind of the territory that I would say distinguishes polyamory from open relationships. Just an easy way to think about it for a second. But during that conversation, couples, I think, really oftentimes focus specifically on the sexual activities that will or will not be done. And they kind of slip into some slippery territory where they forget to talk about the emotional contracts. What are they going to do emotionally in these open relationships or in these polyamorous relationships? So we have the physical contracts, the emotional contracts, the relational contracts, and then the social contracts. And I think all four of those pillars are important because we're humans and love and our heart and our bodies are involved. So I would say the physical contract is what will we do and what will we not do sexually. The emotional contract is, are we allowing romance and falling in love to be part of this openness that we're headed towards? Relationally kind of stems from the emotional contract, but it's, are we opening up to call other people our partners, our boyfriends, our girlfriends, so forth and so on, or not? And then the social contract is, will we come out as an open or polyamorous couple, or is this something that we're going to keep private? And I think having really thorough conversations on all four of those pillars are really, really important, because desires shift, emotions rise, they wax and wane. And you know, the theory of being open or polyamorous is very different than the experience of it. And so those contracts, you can get them set in stone and they can feel ironclad, and then you have an experience and you realize you need to update it, and that's really important.
Yeah, it's like, I like that you use the word evolving, because that's sorry, that's what we do with relationships. Relationships are constantly evolving. Like we are not the same people we are when we initially enter the relationship. So I think evolving is a really good word to use here, especially in the context of like this very complex contract. I just wanted to point out, for the physical aspect of the contract, the sexual health aspect of it, because sexual health is very important. Like I am the biggest, can't say words. Oh my God. I am the biggest, I said biggest. I am the biggest advocate for sexual health and casual sex as well. Like, you can have as much sex or as little sex as you want to. I do recommend or suggest that you do it as safely as possible.
Totally.
And not saying that people who practice ethical non-monogamy are to be shamed simply, but the reality of the situation is, as you increase the number of sexual partners you have sex with, you increase like the possible risks as well if you don't practice safe sex. So sexual health in terms of like getting tested regularly, having that maybe written in the contract, and like having a conversation started where it's like, hey, one of our non-negotiables is like, if we can't have open conversations around like sexual health, sorry, then it's not happening. So
right, yeah, and I think that, I mean, just to kind of piggyback off of this, I would definitely find, in order to maintain like vigilance in a really mature way, you definitely want to find a provider who will provide an anal swab, a throat swab, and blood tests. You want to hit all three of those. I think another thing too that I think is really important, if getting on PrEP is not something that's reasonable or maybe unnecessary, you don't need to take the daily dose of Truvada or Descovy or whatever it might be, open relationships oftentimes find a lot of benefit from 211, which I think is really important, and a lot of people might not know about it. But 211 is, you take a HIV prophylaxis pill 24 to 2 hours before you have sex. and then another pill 24
Sorry.
hours after, and then another pill 24 hours after that. So
Yeah.
it's 2-1-1. So if you know you're going to go on a date, it's designed specifically to be for sex, or you hope that it will happen. 201 could be a great option, and they think they'll give you 30 pills at a time that
Nice.
expire after a year. Don't quote me on that, but they will expire, and you have to get your refill. But that's another great option.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about the 211.
2-1-1.
Sorry, my
That's all right.
allergies keep kicking up and life. But yeah, I hadn't heard about the 211. But it's nice to know because I actually did start doing my research. Side quote here, on PrEP, because I'm not on PrEP and I will be starting PrEP.
Sure.
And I like to do my research as always. I said I rent things out.
Sure.
So I did see like that PrEP does take around like 2 to 3 days to be effective in your body if you're having anal sex. I believe it's like 3 to 4 for vaginal sex, and then for the person who, for the lack of the proper word or the professional word, the person who's topping in terms of like anal sex, they don't know yet how long it takes to act. But yeah, it's good to know that there's like, if you're not going to take it on a daily basis, there's at least like a parameter that could work for this.
Sure, yeah. And I think that's really liberating, especially if you're like monogamish, and there's like, let's say that in your contract with your partner, you're able to have that hall pass whenever you're traveling. I think 211 is a great option for that.
Yeah.
I think it's really, thank goodness, I want to use the word convenient that we have access to that.
Yes.
Because that can keep us really safe.
Yes.
That's okay. We can edit.
I know. It's just, God damn it. Allergies need to learn how to behave.
For sure.
But yes, it is convenient. It should be more accessible. But
totally.
That's a conversation for another time. We could talk about how systems
for sure.
kind of screw us over a little.
And a lot of county hospitals will give it to you for free.
Oh, nice.
So here in the city of Denver, Denver Health, they have a sexual health clinic. If you want to hop on 211 or PrEP or PEP, you can go there and you can get it for free. And for people who don't know what PEP is, it's a 30-day prophylaxis. So if you think that you might have been exposed to HIV, hop on PrEP before 72 hours elapses, and you take 30 days of Descovy and Truvada together. And I think it's like 99.9% effective in curing or killing off any HIV that might be in the circulatory system.
Yeah, which would, like, connecting it back to relationships, there's a lot of social stigma around sexual health. We're talking about open relationships, those things can go together. So I know I mentioned earlier, like, a non-negotiable being, like, if this happens to be a non-negotiable for you, where you don't, like, if you don't talk about your sexual health with potential partners, it's a no-go. I think having this option where PEP, right, which is like 30 days, where it's like 99.9% effective, then we're also like mitigating the stigma around HIV, which could help create a lot of confidence and the element of exploration and opening up a relationship if that's what you want to do.
For sure. I also think it might, I want to pick the right word here, but it might allow us to be a little bit more sophisticated or mature as sexual beings in the community. If I can really take charge and own that I'm on PrEP, or that I need PEP, or I have a bottle ready for 211 in my cupboard, that allows me to talk very openly with the people that I might engage with sexually. If I'm solo poly, it gives me this ability to have a lot of really mature conversations with healthy consent. If I'm in an open relationship or monogamish relationship, I just think those conversations around sex and sexual health will demystify the fact or destigmatize the fact that we are made to be sexual beings.
Yes.
And I think that's just, it's such a beautiful thing, but it's also so wrapped up in shame. I'm getting off on a tangent here, but...
Oh no, shame is unfortunately everywhere.
Right.
We wish it wasn't, but unfortunately that's not how we've structured this world. But that kind of brought up this, as I like to call, the real world out of a therapy room, the wild.
I'm going to start using that. You've said it before, you said it in class the other day, and I was like, I love that.
I know, right? Like, it's the wild, because, just once again, a little rabbit trail here. Therapeutic spaces feel safe most of the time when we're working through things, because we have this disconnect from the wild.
Right.
Once we get thrown out in the wild, we have like this overwhelming sense of stimuli and information getting thrown at us all the time. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about how, kind of lost my train of thought for that little rabbit trail hole, whatever. Alice in the Wonderland moment there. But yeah, I know we've talked about, well, when I'm out in the wild, don't know where that was going, but when I'm out in the wild, as someone who's currently participating in what people call the dating scene or the dating pool, which is wonderful, I've heard a lot how opening up a relationship or ethical non-monogamy has become a new standard. Like, especially for queer folks, it's like, if you are queer and you want to date, eventually your relationship will have to open up in order to have like a healthy, safe relationship. What are your thoughts on that, and how, I don't know, like what consequences can that bring up? And you've worked with couples for a couple of years, so how has that shown up in your work?
I mean, we could turn this into a 7-part series, so I'll keep it really short. But one of the first things I think is important is that kind of looking at the origin of monogamy, we can trace it back to patriarchy, and I think that's really, really important, because a lot of people who want to deconstruct patriarchy in the way that it affects systems that we function and live in, I think it's really important that sexual liberation is a facet of our lives that we have access to, that we are liberated to enjoy our bodies the way we want to enjoy our bodies. That being said, when we make something a standard for a whole community of people, we start to, in my opinion, overlook the presence of diversity in that group of people. By no means would I say that all people who are queer or trans need to experience or delve into open relationships or polyamory or anything of that sort, unless they really feel like it's either self-discovery, exploration, or actually part of who they are. I want to just kind of identify that demisexuality is a really big part of people's orientation. And when we say that demisexual people should participate in polyamory, we're kind of opening up this really beautiful conversation around, like, a demi person, what does their body and their orientation kind of require out of polyamory? And will they find the emotional intimacy that their body needs to enjoy sex? I don't know. And I think we just want to be really careful, because for a lot of people, monogamy isn't just a political stance or a facet of like religious residue. It might actually be something that's kind of wrapped up in their physiology. We talk about this often on the podcast, and I'll make it short, but safety plays maybe one of the biggest roles in sex. So when we know that we're emotionally, relationally, or emotionally safe, our body can go into cool, calm, and collected, which it needs to do first in order to reach orgasm. And so safety is going to mean different things for different people. And if open relationships or polyamory doesn't quite hit that button of safety, that might not be an option for your body. Open relationships might not be fulfilling. So that's one way that I look at it. You know, when we want to respect the diversity of people, we also have to respect how it shows up in our sexual bodies.
Yeah, it's, two things can coexist at once without one taking priority over the other. And, you know, if you practice monogamy or if you practice polyamory, it does not mean that, or it doesn't have to mean that you're invalidating other people's diversity or other people's choice slash lifestyle slash whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think it's a lot of, and sometimes our bodies weren't built for it. Like, as you mentioned, like it's up to each individual. Like, we can't do,
Right.
so it sounds like we have a lot of work to do
Yes.
as a community and as a whole.
And I think giving ourselves that, you know, as much as we give ourselves permission to be in open relationships, to experience polyamory, I think we should also give ourselves the permission to respect what our bodies, how our bodies participate in relationships and in sexual intimacy. I have a thought that's brewing. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I don't know. We can keep going. It might come to me.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was thinking, like, it reminds me of how another, like, socially oppressed group or community, like the BDSM community, has always been focused primarily on that sense of safety in order to achieve sexual stimulation and satisfaction.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's like an interesting take on how we could learn something from them, because even though they do explore aspects of pain and bondage, things that we would normally associate with not feeling safe, there are still aspects of it where safety and communication are the two biggest things they talk about. And they have like safe words, just like, so I don't know, I think that's like a great way of seeing.
I love what you're highlighting here. Yeah, like how, I'm going to use this word on purpose, but how beautiful is it to create a type of safety with someone where you can go into this like bondage, even pain, and know that the safety is designed to hold that space and the tension in that space with the safety of this keyword to back up out of it. Like, that's a serious practice of trusting safety. And I think that's kind of beautiful in a very kinky way. And if that's what it's supposed to be. I think the thought that's brewing is kind of this idea around the safety that monogamy provides for some people isn't a standard of safety that should be experienced by all people. Safety will mean different things to different people. I love speed. Give me a motor, a jet ski, a snowmobile, a fast car, and I will push that thing to its limits. And I feel safe there, and it's fun and thrilling. My husband will not even get on a snowmobile with me. That's not his version of safety. In different areas, what is safe for him isn't safe for me. And again, going back to this idea of what is the mature, sophisticated conversation around safety, I think that might be more of the important conversation than debating between monogamy versus ethical non-monogamy.
Right, it's just not overgeneralizing, creating a standard for everyone. It's just like, let's liberate dating and sex to the point where you get to choose and won't be judged for it.
Exactly.
Regardless of whatever you get to choose.
Exactly. Yes.
And that is a lot of work on the shoulders of a few.
Exactly. But this is, I say this often, but how beautiful would it be if queer and trans people set the standard for that kind of respect of diversity? Like if because we have these conversations and we embody it, that it starts to hit the cisgender or heterosexual communities, like, I just think that would be amazing. Like, we get to be the renegades, why not? We already are. Let's just keep going.
Right. You know, we have all this power, why not use it for good? Low-key watching too many superhero movies lately, and I'm like, with great power, with great power comes great responsibility. Not really a Spider-Man fan, but great movie.
I was actually, love TikToks and people who channel and Akashic readings. I can nerd about that stuff all day long. But there was this one lady on TikTok, and she quoted someone else, and I'm not going to remember, but she said, when you make yourself zero, you make your power invincible. And I think this is part of making ourselves zero, in the sense that, like, I just get to be a human with a very specific version of safety that works for me. And it doesn't have to be better than anybody's. It doesn't have to be less than. It's just zero, where everybody's on this equal playing field. And when we can all appreciate that version of zero, our power is invincible. Because we're respecting how diversity shows up on the planet.
We don't have all these like preconceived expectations, standards,
Pressure.
or molds for people to fit into. Like, we just take you as you are, and if we like it, good, and if we don't like it, we'll respect you, but it's not really infringing on what my interests are.
Right. And how, I mean, again, just bear with my language here, but if we were to take that kind of openness and honesty and self-respect and stand naked and unafraid in front of someone, and they love us because of that self-respect, there's no deeper version of love than that, in my opinion, like unconditional. Now we're traipsing into some beautiful territory that I think maybe might take us into our next areas, like secure attachments, and how we use polyamory or open relationships.
And I'm going to try to say something very beautiful here, because it is, and then I'll turn it very dark very fast for some reason. But yeah, like, love to a certain degree equals vulnerability. Like, the most beautiful kinds of love or actions related to love come from being vulnerable with a platonic person, romantic, etc. That being said, this is where we take a dark turn a little, or maybe not a dark turn, just like a cautionary tale, we can call that. How sometimes, I think we've been teasing it for a while since we started, but how we can, I'm going to butcher this because the thoughts are coming really fast, but how sometimes we use the concept of opening up a relationship to kind of like self-medicate. And personally, I don't think that's how someone should start to open up a relationship, because opening up a relationship is not a fix-all. If there are issues in a relationship already, or something that's concerning, I feel like to build that foundation around safety, around trust, around love, we need to be vulnerable, where we get to voice our concerns, where we get to voice what's making us feel uncomfortable, etc. So,
yeah, I think you'll hear it maybe said this way in different places, but open relationships, or ethical non-monogamy, or whatever we want to call it, should come from a place of abundance, not need. And as therapists, what I see oftentimes, not all the time, but are couples who came in who opened up out of need, and then they have to kind of stabilize the relationship because the need became bigger. They were emotionally hungry, they opened up, and then the emotional hunger actually got worse instead of softened. I have many thoughts on that. Do you want to?
Yeah, we can go into it. I just to add a little something, because I was having a conversation about this.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I had a little. Okay. I freaked out that I wasn't actually recording.
We could have started over. A whole different conversation was going to be happening, but a good one. But yeah, I was having a conversation a bit earlier today.
It's nice to have one's work appreciated.
Yes, they are. And bear with this very traditional, maybe outdated, outlandish, heteronormative analogy, but if you're opening up your relationship to save it, or out of a need, not abundance, it kind of reminds me of this. We see it a lot in movies, and like we read about it all the time, where it's like cisgendered heterosexual couples were like, I'm going to get pregnant to trap this person and keep them close because I fear they're going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's a very drastic analogy, but that's sometimes what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
If my needs are not being met, if I feel like you're pulling away, you're detaching from me,
Mm-hmm.
how can I keep you close? Like that closeness.
Mm-hmm.
How do I keep you close to me so I don't lose you? And it's like, oh, you've mentioned before how like you want to have sex outside of a relationship, then let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then verbally it sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
In our bodies and our minds, we have this
Right.
chaos going on where it's like,
Right.
this is not what I want to do, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice my peace for a semblance or like a crumb of love.
For sure. Yeah. This is maybe one of the most typical ways that I see it, and it definitely relates to what you're saying here. In our community, we call it people pleasing. I might call it the performer dynamic. But and I talk about this on the podcast often, but just real briefly, when we grow up in the closet, we grow up learning how to please other people.
Mhm.
We're hiding who we are. We're filtering our personality so that people feel comfortable around us. That becomes our relational software, and we take it into romantic relationships. So here we are, we show up and we say, I feel invisible inside of my relationship because I'm not really being seen. The show I'm putting on is being seen.
Mhm.
I've been trained to appear spectacular, but behind that spectacularity in the show, I'm feeling unnoticed, unimportant, invisible inside of my relationship. So who can see me?
Mhm.
Who will cherish me? Who will fill up these buckets that my relationship isn't filling up? And then open relationships or polyamory theoretically sound like a great idea because you're investing in someone else, so who will get to invest in me?
Mhm.
And that's where I see couples getting into some really murky water because it's really hard to stabilize a relationship when it's out of need because
Mhm.
contracts are broken very easily when you're operating out of need.
Yeah, just because there's more people in the relationship does not mean that there might be more to go around.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just, no.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, unless it's a safe and secure relationship built on this contract we've mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If it's done out of abundance and not need,
Mm-hmm.
for sure, more will mean more, but
Right.
mm-hmm. How much can you truly give when you're, this might sound a bit rough, but how much can you truly give when you yourself are lacking in something?
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. When it feels like there's a hole in this emotional bucket that needs to be fulfilled, and we feel like an open relationship or consensual non-monogamy will be good putty to fill in that hole, I get a little worried.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's an entirely bad thing. We just want to make sure that it's, I'm going to say it this way, shame-free.
Yes.
And the reason I say shame-free is because what's a good example? I'm going to pick feeling known. If I have, you know me, but if I have a bucket that's labeled feeling known and my partner is supposed to fill it up for me, not entirely, I mean, I can get into the whole specifics of this, but if my partner is designed or should fill it up for me, but I don't feel known in the way that is really satisfying, I might say, okay, if you're not going to fill this up, who will?
Mm-hmm.
And part of what we do with those buckets that aren't being fulfilled is we can become ambivalent about them. I want to show them to other people to have them fulfilled, but what if I don't deserve it? I'm ready for it right now, but what if I actually can't get it fulfilled? And so open relationships is a way for us on a subconscious level to negotiate those buckets with other people. And so to keep going with my metaphor or my example here, if I'm feeling known by the person I have consensual sex with, but I'm not feeling it inside of my primary relationship, I can start to become resentful of my partner. I can become very confused. And this is how contracts get easily broken and relationships start to really suffer by resentment.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to say that resentment isn't anger-based, it's envy-based. And so it's basically saying something like, babe, you have the ability to fill up my bucket. You have what it takes, and you're not giving it to me, and I'm envious that
Mm-hmm.
you have the ability to make me feel known, and you're not giving it to me. And so that resentment grows. And I always tell my couples that, and my polycules, that resentment is relational cancer. And so we want to make sure that those contracts are clean, for sure, but we also, maybe more than that, want to make sure that the attachment
Mm-hmm.
is as secure as possible.
Yeah, it requires work from both ends.
Mm-hmm.
It's, yes, you have what I need. You're offering me, like, you know how to fill my bucket of being known. That was the one we were going with,
Mhm.
yes. The bucket of being known. But I also have to learn how to ask for it. I just
Mhm.
can't expect you to give it to me. And I think
Mhm.
that's where the secure attachment comes from, where I feel secure enough in our relationship to be emotionally vulnerable, to ask, like, hey, and to communicate. If we're bringing it back to open relationships, kind of communicating, like, hey, something is happening in our dynamic where I feel like let's, like, the primary couple here, one of the members says something is happening where the emotional needs that I want to meet with you are not being met, and I'm getting them from the secondary, or
Mhm.
I don't know how to keep
Sure.
adding, but
Mhm.
the externals.
Mhm.
That sounds so weird saying
Sure,
externals,
sure.
and I apologize to everyone, but sometimes we lack language,
Sure.
which is
Mhm.
part of it as well. We need to learn how to
Right, for
use,
sure. Mhm.
or like create a general language for
Mhm.
these dynamics. Yeah, I think my dark turn really took a little sad, gloomy turn there. So let's turn it back around, and maybe, and we've also been kind of mentioning them here and there, but I think it would be helpful if we mention like specific benefits
Mhm.
of once you build that secure attachment in your relationships and you take the step out of abundance to open up a relationship or to practice ethical non-monogamy or polyamory,
Mhm.
or whichever of the ramifications of this umbrella you choose to partake in. What are some of the benefits that, once again, going back to your couples with
Mhm.
you have the experience, what have you seen that kind of shows up as a positive aspect of
Mhm.
participating in open relationships?
Yeah, I'll start here by saying, like, I'm so proud of who we are as a community, that we're brave enough and honest enough to move into territory that feels new.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give an example to maybe articulate my point. But I had a couple in the office, and one of them wanted monogamy, one of them wanted polyamory, and the one who wanted polyamory was so in love, and he just doted on his partner, he committed to monogamy. And the partner asked him, what do you miss? And he said, I just miss the ability to love other people. And I thought that was a really innocent and beautiful statement. I think that when the relationship opens up, because it is so securely rooted in honesty, in love, in fidelity, and commitment, sexual openness, I think, gets to be a form of, first and foremost, maybe playfulness.
Mm-hmm.
It is very in us to be playful and spontaneous and whimsical. And sex, I think, is a great way to go out and have fun as adults in ways that we don't get to have fun as children anymore. So that's, I think, a good piece. I also think as queer and trans people, we live so much of our lives holding our breath, missing out on opportunities, and we don't get to explore because the closet is so confining.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes, when the relationship is so deeply rooted and firmly steadfast, that exploration can be really fun. You know, what bodies do I enjoy? Which ones don't I? what do different gonads look like? Because I've only seen a handful, but what do more look like? And can I get, there's a general interest. And I think that curiosity, again, the exploration, you discover more of who you are. I always tell my clients, free but wise. You get to be totally free, but use wisdom in how you make choices. So
I like that. I hadn't, sorry I interrupted, but I was like,
that's great.
we need to get it in there. I do like the free but wise, because as a fellow, not TikToker, because I do not make TikTokers, but as a fellow TikTok lover, there was a trend, and it's still like a sound, and I feel like sometimes we unconsciously embody all these TikTok trends where it's like, I'm crazy but I'm free, and it added the music, and it was all pretty. And I'm like, yes, but I like this more, free and wise, because I get to be free, and by being wise, I get to know my limits, know other people's limits, so I don't hurt myself or hurt others. So it sounds like there's an element of like self-awareness to that exploration. Kind of, if we build a relationship from the secure, I forgot the word you used. I don't know if it was attachment. You used something else, which I liked, but memory lacks sometimes.
Sure.
But if we build this relationship from a secure attachment, we get to be playful, we get to explore, and we also get to grow aware of our likes and dislikes. We get to help establish those boundaries where it's like, yeah, that's not going to work for me anymore, but go ahead.
Right. The way that I see this happening in the most healthy version, yes, the version of safety is set. Both people experience safety in the same way that makes consensual non-monogamy possible. So that's step one. The other thing that I notice, and I don't have research for this, but the relationships that make openness work really well are the ones who experience their own inherent value. And I think there's something so foundational about that. If I can understand that I am inherently valuable, I can easily see it in everybody else around me. And when I approach sex out of that abundance, it becomes about appreciation, it gets to be playful. And then there's the wisdom of like, I'm engaging in someone else as opposed to using someone else. And again, that reflects back to the need versus abundance. It could be the way that you approve of my body is filling up a bucket that's not being filled up anywhere else. And so I need you and your approval for sex to satisfy me, to make me feel whole, to almost in a sense give me value. And that's where I notice, again, the waters get a little murky, but the benefit here that I kind of want to emphasize is that a lot of times the open relationships, they've done some really beautiful work, and it's an experience of interacting with someone else's inherent value, and I think that that's maybe the whole point of sex.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I have a little phrase that I like to use a lot of the time where I'm like, go to therapy. It's not because I'm a therapist in training or anything. I do feel like a lot of there's a lot that we have to work through, and that sense of like inherent value could potentially benefit from. I don't know. We all go through breakups, unfortunately, and breakups kind of hurt, and that hurt might be activated, maybe if there's a potential of more than one person in a relationship.
For sure.
So, go to therapy. That is my little go to therapy.
Yes.
It's worth it.
I agree. And I think that if there were one thing I would tell the world, and as at least when I'm sitting here in this chair today, it might change in 5 minutes, but I would say, at least to the queer and trans communities, fight for your ability to experience your own inherent value, not just know about it cognitively, but experience it in your body. because we deserve to understand how beautiful we are in this version of queer transness.
Yeah. Which would connect back to being vulnerable. And I think as a society, we've lost the ability, like a beautiful ability, to open up and be vulnerable. We learn how to put, and I say this from personal experience, we learn how to put up all these walls to protect ourselves, but then we find ourselves like late at night in bed thinking, why do I not feel fulfilled? Why don't I feel whole?
Right.
So, again, be vulnerable. Go to therapy. That's. I won't say it anymore. I promise. Well, at least
At least in this episode.
at least in this episode. Yeah.